The sun was sinking behind the tall trees, painting the sky with shades of gold and crimson. That evening felt different. One by one, families stepped out of their small mud brick homes and walked toward the center of the village. Children ran ahead, laughing and chasing each other, while women carried little stools to sit on. The elders leaned on their wooden staffs, their wrinkled eyes sharp with curiosity. A strange silence rested over the crowd, as if everyone already sensed something unusual was about to happen. At the heart of the open square lay the ancient talking drum. For generations, it had been used to send messages across the hills, to call people together in times of danger or celebration. But tonight the gathering wasn't for a festival or a wedding. It was called because the drum had begun to sound on its own the night before, echoing through the village like a restless spirit. Now a young drummer stepped forward, his hands trembling slightly. He struck the first beat, deep, thunderous, echoing like a heartbeat. The second beat followed, sharper, more urgent. Suddenly the villagers felt their chests tighten. The drum was not just making music. It was speaking. As the crowd leaned closer, the rhythm of the drum began to change. At first, the beats were slow and steady, like the usual calls everyone had heard since childhood. But then a strange shift happened. The sound grew uneven, sometimes racing ahead, sometimes pausing as if catching its breath. It was no longer the familiar pattern of festival songs or warnings of danger. This was something different, something unsettling. The children, who had been sitting restlessly, went silent. Mothers pulled them closer, their arms tightening around small shoulders. Even the birds that usually darted around the square seemed to have vanished into the trees, leaving only the echo of the drum. Every strike carried a strange tone, almost like a human voice trapped inside the hollow wood, trying to force its way out. The elders exchanged worried glances. They had heard many rhythms in their lives, but none like this. Some whispered that the drum was angry. Others believed it was trying to reveal a hidden truth. Each beat echoed through the hearts of the villagers, stirring fear, curiosity, and wonder all at once. The drum was not just being played, it was speaking, and everyone knew it. The moment the strange rhythm filled the air, the entire gathering froze. Men who had been whispering fell silent, women stopped fanning themselves, and children hid their faces against their mothers' laps. The sound of the drum seemed to wrap around the crowd, pulling them into a heavy stillness. With every beat, the villagers felt a message pressing against their hearts. It wasn't music anymore, it was a voice without words, a cry carried in rhythm. Some people gasped softly, while others simply stared at the drum, their brows furrowed in confusion. A few of the younger men shifted uneasily as if ready to run, but their feet refused to move. An old woman near the front clutched her chest and whispered, "This drum is alive." Her words spread like fire through the people. Could it be true? Could the drum actually be speaking? A heavy sense of truth filled the square, though no one could explain what the truth was. Everyone felt it, but no one dared to say it aloud. The air was thick with fear and wonder. The drum was no longer an object. It had become a voice, and it was demanding to be heard. The silence of the crowd was broken when the oldest man in the village slowly rose to his feet. His back was bent with age, his beard long and white, and his eyes, though clouded, still carried the weight of wisdom. Everyone turned toward him, for in times of confusion, his voice was the one they trusted. He raised his hand, asking the drummer to stop. But even when the boy pulled his hands away, the last echoes of the strange rhythm seemed to linger in the air, trembling through the square. The elder's gaze swept across the villagers before settling on the ancient drum. "This is no ordinary sound," he said, his voice low but firm. "I have heard these rhythms since I was a boy, in times of war, in times of harvest, in times of mourning. But tonight," he paused, letting the silence stretch. "Tonight the drum is not calling us to gather. It is not warning us of danger. Tonight the drum is speaking the truth." A ripple of shock moved through the crowd. The villagers exchanged uneasy glances. If the elder himself believed the drum spoke truth, then something hidden was about to be revealed. The villagers held their breath as the elder's words sank deep into their minds. All eyes returned to the drum. Suddenly the rhythm began again, slower this time, heavy, almost sorrowful. Each beat seemed to carve meaning into the silence, and the people felt as though they were listening to a hidden story unfold. The sound rose and fell, echoing like footsteps in the dark. Then, without warning, the rhythm shifted into a sharp, relentless pattern. The crowd gasped. It was not random anymore, it was pointing, accusing, demanding. Mothers clutched their children tighter, men looked around nervously, and whispers rippled through the gathering. "It's revealing something," one woman murmured. "A truth among us." The elder closed his eyes, nodding slowly. Yes, he said, the drum speaks of a secret long buried. His words struck the villagers like a hammer. Suddenly, faces turned toward one another, suspicion flickering in their eyes. Who was hiding something? What truth was struggling to come out? At that moment, the drum thundered louder than ever, shaking the earth beneath their feet. It was no longer a question, it was a declaration. A hidden secret had been dragged into the open, and no one could pretend ignorance anymore. For a long moment, no one dared to move. Then, slowly, the oldest elder in the village rose from where he sat. His steps were unsteady, but his presence carried the weight of generations. The crowd instinctively parted, making room for him as he approached the center of the square. His wrinkled hand rested on the carved stick he always carried, and his cloudy eyes fixed firmly on the ancient drum. The drummer's hands had already stilled, yet the people swore they could still hear the faint echo of its strange rhythm lingering in the air. The elder lifted his hand, commanding silence, though no one had spoken a word. "My children," he began, his voice deep and steady, "do not mistake what you have heard tonight. This is no ordinary music. These are not the beats of celebration or warning. I have lived long enough to hear every message this drum has carried. But what we heard tonight," he paused, letting his words hang heavy in the air. "Tonight the drum spoke the truth." Gasps rippled through the crowd. If the wisest elder believed the drum had spoken truth, then something powerful and undeniable had been revealed. As the last echo of the drum faded into the night air, the villagers stood frozen. The elder's words still hung heavy over them. "The drum speaks of betrayal." For a moment no one moved. Then, slowly, all eyes began to drift across the crowd, searching. Suspicion spread like wildfire, every face examined, every gesture measured. And then it happened. Near the edge of the gathering, a man shifted uncomfortably. His jaw tightened, his hands trembled as he tried to fold them behind his back. Beads of sweat glistened on his forehead despite the cool evening breeze. When the drum sounded again, sharp, accusing, unrelenting, his eyes darted to the ground, unable to meet the stares now fixed on him. The villagers noticed instantly. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mothers whispered to one another, children pointed with wide, frightened eyes, and the elders frowned with grim recognition. His face told the story he had hidden for so long. No words were needed, the truth was written in his fear. The man's mask had cracked. And in that single moment the people knew, the drum had found its mark. The guilty one was standing among them, and there was no escape from the truth. The whispers grew heavier, circling the man like a tightening rope. He could feel the eyes of the entire village burning into him, and no matter how hard he tried, he could not escape their gaze. His chest rose and fell in quick, shallow breaths. The drum gave one final thunderous beat, echoing like a command. That sound broke him. With trembling legs he stepped forward into the center of the square. The murmurs fell silent at once. The villagers leaned in, waiting. His lips quivered as he tried to speak, but no words came. Finally, with a shuddering breath, he dropped to his knees. "It is true," he said, his voice hoarse but clear. "The drum has spoken rightly. I am the one who hid the truth." His words sent shock through the crowd. Gasps escaped from every corner, and even the children stared wide-eyed, sensing the gravity of the moment. The man lowered his head, tears slipping down his cheeks. "I thought I could bury it," he whispered. "But the drum, it knows what the heart tries to hide." The silence that followed was heavier than any beat of the drum. The truth was out at last. The man's trembling face was enough. The change in his expression had betrayed him, and the crowd could no longer ignore what the drum had revealed. A heavy silence followed, but it did not last long. Soon, soft whispers began to spread through the gathering, weaving like restless wind between the villagers. "Did you see his eyes?" one woman muttered under her breath. "He cannot even stand straight," another replied. Children tugged at their mother's clothes, asking what was happening, but were quickly hushed. The murmurs grew louder, carrying fragments of fear, anger, and curiosity. Some accused him openly, their words sharp like arrows. Others hesitated, unsure if they dared to believe that a drum could expose such a secret. But the more they whispered, the stronger their conviction became. The man avoided their eyes, his shoulders hunched as if the weight of their voices was pressing him down. The elder raised a hand, but even he could not silence the murmurs now. The truth was loose among the people, and it spread with every hushed word. The crowd no longer doubted. The drum had spoken, and the guilty man's face had confirmed it. The man's confession lingered in the air like a heavy shadow. For a long time no one spoke. The villagers stared at him, then at the ancient drum and finally at each other. The truth had been hidden for so long, buried under silence and deception. Yet here it was, dragged out into the open by a rhythm that no one could deny. Slowly, an elder's voice broke the silence. Do you see now? A lie can hide in the dark for years, but it cannot live forever. The truth will always find its way. His words carried across the square, reaching every ear, young and old. The people nodded, some solemn, some with tears in their eyes. Parents pulled their children close, whispering lessons of honesty. Friends exchanged glances, silently promising never to repeat the same mistake. The guilty man's shame had become the village's wisdom, a story they would carry into the future. From that night onward, the villagers understood that truth was stronger than any wall of lies. And they would never again forget the power of the talking drum. The drum falls silent. The drum grows quiet as if its work is done. After the man's confession and the lesson that followed, the crowd turned once more toward the ancient drum. It rested in the center of the square, its skin still trembling faintly from the last echo. For a moment it seemed alive, breathing, waiting, watching. But then, slowly the sound faded completely. The silence was powerful, deeper than before. It was as though the drum had given its final word, and now there was nothing left to say. The villagers stood quietly, not daring to disturb the calm. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath, the night sky blanketing them in stillness. The elder bowed his head respectfully. The drum has done its duty, he whispered. It spoke the truth and now it rests. The villagers followed his example, lowering their heads, honoring the mysterious force that had guided them. Though the drum was only wood and hide, they would never again see it as ordinary. When they finally dispersed to their homes, the square remained quiet, the drum motionless. It had revealed what was hidden, brought truth into the open, and now, satisfied, it fell into silence, like a guardian who had completed its task.